This is now the Byrne SCIP Advisory Board.
We'd invite the other Byrne SCIP Advisory Board members to
Join
the
us.
dais.
There we go. Jonathan, there's a spot for you up here.
And then I did want to check, Madam Chair, and then with Ian as well, if we had any other people that wanted to. We're getting into, last time was just a very, very high level overview of the SCIP grant. And I know Judge Guard is going to step off the SCIP Advisory Committee due to potential conflicts. And I just wanted to see if there were any other board members that wanted to step off the SCIP Advisory Board.
Well, Council, are you seeing a potential for someone that you might suggest to them, or are you just?
I don't know. So I'm looking at, and I'm not looking for inviting people to leave soon or to be sure, but again, yeah, to the extent that a county or city department might apply, it may be good for you to step down.
Let the record reflect we have.
There's also a local. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's going to be a potential local pot of money.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
it's been a pleasure, the three of you. And Sheriff Dykus, you're here. Are you leaving now?
Take care, Chief.
No, that's why I wanted to check with Aaron. There is a possibility that I would submit for a Byrne JAG grant. I just want to make sure that that's the appropriate thing to do.
Take care.
Yeah, so if Sheriff, if you're interested in the Byrne, potentially interested, and again, we don't know the exact contours of what this program might look like, but we're going to start making some of those decisions. And if you have any inkling that this pot of money might be available to you and you might want to apply for it, we'd look for you to step away.
Yeah,
So
Aaron, I'm going to step away then, and I apologize to the group. I certainly would like to help out, but there is a chance.
Sorry.
Okay, well, I appreciate you staying on, and thank you and goodbye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
So, Madam Chair, just to be sure, so if we're receiving the Byrne JAG funding for that separate grant, that's
So that's a
Not
separate
this.
pot of
Different.
money. Yeah.
different.
right.
Okay.
Am I good to go, ma'am?
You are good to go, Ian.
Apologies, had to step away there for a second. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Advisory Board members. Ian Silva, Field Representative with the Corrections Planning and Grants Program Division. I guess I should probably be able to say my own division correctly, but I apologize. Before you today to request the board's input on the preliminary plan for the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program, on which the Advisory Board was briefed in February. However, before we discuss specific elements of that plan, I would like to update the board on a recent development related to the Byrne SCIP grant. In late February, the Legislative Analyst Office posted a report on the Byrne SCIP grant that included 4 specific recommendations to the California State Legislature. For reference, the Legislative Analyst Office, or LAO, provides fiscal and policy advice to the legislature. While BSCC has not as of yet received a formal request or direction from the legislature, I'd like to familiarize the board with the LAO's recommendations in case formal direction is ultimately forthcoming. The first recommendation from the LAO is that the legislature direct the BSCC not to finalize plans for the use of SCIP funds until after the state budget is adopted. The second recommendation is that the legislature ensure that BSCC's plan for SCIP funding is aligned to reflect the legislature's priorities. If the legislature were to act on these recommendations, BSCC would delay the board's approval of the SCIP plan pending passage of the state budget. Staff would then have to reconcile the current plan with whatever specific direction the legislature provides regarding the use of SCIP funds. Any such revision would then need to be brought back to this board for approval. The second 2 recommendations listed here under federal funding authority are administrative in nature and do not impact the advisory board's decision-making. They're only displayed here for the sake of transparency. Despite this report, staff recommends that the advisory board continue with the current planning process for 2 reasons. First, if no direction from the legislature is forthcoming, we can avoid unnecessarily delaying the grant program. Second, solidifying key elements of the BSCC plan will likely make it easier to incorporate any input we may receive from the legislature into a revised plan for this board's approval. With that, can I answer any questions about the LAO's recommendation before moving on?
Seeing none.
Seeing none? All right. In that case, I will move on to the preliminary plan by itself. By way of reminder, the preliminary plan is intended to develop a multi-pronged approach to decreasing gun violence in California, to support local jurisdictions in their efforts to improve firearm relinquishment procedures, and to support the enhancement of collaborative court programs that address behavioral health issues with a focus on people who are at higher risk for gun violence. Now, as you may recall, the proposed plan allocates SCIP fundings into 3 sets of subawards based largely on the pass-through amounts stipulated by the BJA. 2 subawards would be allocated to the Judicial Council as shown in columns B and D, and the Judicial Council would in turn make subawards to the local courts. The 3rd set of subawards would be allocated to local governments as seen in column C. I'd like to discuss each of these subawards separately. And I would first like to turn to the local allocations for the board's input. As proposed, these subawards would be intended to include program activities such as law enforcement programs to safely secure, store, track, and return relinquished guns, behavioral health deflection programs for those at risk to themselves or others, and programs that support collaborative court processes. One of the key issues on which the board's input is requested is the basis on which these awards might be made. Staff discussions have focused around 2 scenarios that your board might consider. First, awards could be made based on a competitive request proposal, as is typical with BSCC grants. A second idea has been discussed in which the local awards might be coordinated with the subawards made by the Judicial Council. In this scenario, when the Judicial Council makes the subawards to local courts, the BSCC would then offer a corresponding non-competitive awards to local governments in that jurisdiction. Thus, the local allocations could help support governments whose operations might be impacted by the court programs or who wish to support those programs. This also might help avoid scenarios like the one mentioned in our last meeting in which one agency in a county received funding for a program, but a partner agency was not funded. And with that overview, I'd like to open the floor, I'd like to open the floor to any questions or input the board might have on this element of the SCIP plan. For reference, I've provided a slide with a summary list of allowable activities mentioned in the Byrne SCIP solicitation, if that's helpful.
I didn't know the iPad would ring. My apologies. This is off.
So I think what we'd really like just some input from the advisory board on is again, whether or not the preference would be to do competitive grants for this local pot of money, or whether or not it would be acceptable to do non-competitive coordinated grants with the court allocations. And of course, we don't know what the courts have allocated or proposed to allocate yet, correct?
Not yet. They would go, the courts would go through a internal proposal process by which they would make their own subawards.
So we would look to see if there's any preference from this body as to whether or not, again, coordinated, non-competitive versus competitive. Any thoughts?
I do have a thought. Would it be allowable for us to let staff consider what alternatives are the best fit, or do we need to make a suggestion from this board to staff?
It would be helpful if we just knew where to land, because what we're looking to do right now, again, depending on whether or not the legislature takes any, gives us any further direction as part of the budget process, is bringing back the plan for actual approval to this body in June.
When you're talking about partnering any non-competitive funding with whatever the court does. Could you elaborate on that just a little?
Sure. So what we expect to see is eventually the judicial council will tell us exactly what courts are being funded to do the collaborative courts and other activities. And so the proposal would be, once we get that list of county courts, to just say, okay, county entities within other county entities, here's a separate pot of money, a separate allocation. If you wish to apply directly to us, then we would allocate that money out directly on a non-competitive basis. But it would basically, the idea would be you'd have local jurisdictions, probation, sheriff, or police partnering with the courts effectively in order to do the whole programs together. And again, I think as we've talked about, these programs are pretty court-centric in as much as they're dealing with violence restraining orders and other things like that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just adding a thought. We really were noticing in the initial conversation of this advisory body comments, I believe from Sheriff Dykes and Chief Haynes in particular, that if the court is running a program that would result in needs like safe, secure storage of firearms and those sorts of things, that it would be really terrific to have some funding available for other county partners. And so, you know, this was an idea that our team came up with to say, so if it turns out that these, just totally making up the number, these 8 collaborative courts are going to be funded across 8 counties, how about basically sort of like partnered grants that the other county entities could go for? That was,
Because it is often the case, they want probation or the sheriff or somebody to partner with them on the endeavor. Is that,
yes.
that makes some sense
Yes.
to me as a board member. Looking to anybody else?
Madam Chair, I would say just one quick comment, and I talked about it a little bit the last time, but we're speaking specifically about collaborative courts, but there's also a function of just generally the regular court process that's required under Prop 63, that weapons relinquishment has to happen with any convicted felon. And I'm not sure if this is that broadly used in that kind of context, or are we talking about for this funding being something more geared towards some specific kinds of court operations?
I think as if you could go back to the allowable activities
Yes.
things, these are the types of things that we'd be looking to fund. And then again, in terms of the local pot, whether or not we should tie it to the court funding, or whether it can be a free for all for any jurisdiction that's interested in participating can apply competitively. In which case we might make you score something,
Yeah.
but or we might have
Well-
to do separate scoring committee.
Yeah,
So that's the plus and minus of doing a competitive versus non-competitive
right,
process.
right. And then also kind of whether Kelly and I should be, even here, because that's the other part of this is.
That is, yes. So,
Because they're all probation departments pretty much are tasked with all of those Prop 63 folks.
yeah, so if you'd like to flee now, I invite you to do so.
It might be a good idea.
Okay.
Now that we're I'm peeling,
Yeah.
this onion back a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, chiefs.
Am I on? But I do a lot of work with our collaborative courts. We have very robust collaborative courts in Yolo County. And also we're doing a lot of work in the area of, gun violence restraining orders and all those sorts of things. And in my view, the courts really don't play that central of a role. They may be the hub, but all the work is done in the collaborative courts by the partners, whether that's the sheriff or the DA, public defender, and particularly your probation department and health and human services that are doing the big treatment piece. And so then you have the issue of, going out and getting the firearms, which is a huge issue for law enforcement, and that takes a lot of resources. That's one of the issues we're having right now with local law enforcement, especially when you look at collecting firearms in domestic violence cases. We just don't have the manpower to send officers out there to go get firearms. You sometimes just have to trust that they're being turned in. So I don't know if it's the best approach to give the money to the courts and have them pass it through to their partners. just because like, I don't think the courts play the central role. When I look at those 4 items, I don't see the court isn't going to do communication, education, and public awareness. They're not going to train in implementing the ERPOs. They're not going to do the big behavioral health piece, and they're not going to do the law enforcement piece.
So we're, to clarify with this slide of the local government pass through, that is a separate pot of money. We're not asking the courts to pass through that money. It is a separate designated pot, and sort of the question we have is whether as the SCIP advisory board / BSCC is giving out that local pot of money, whether we should do it coordinated with the court grants so that those local programs could support the court, or vice versa, the court can, the local grants could support the court, or whether to just, again, more of a competitive basis, come one, come all. If you want to do any of these activities, feel free to do so irrespective of whatever the courts are doing and whatever their grant programs are doing. And we just have to, whatever we say, and again, either way is fine. We just have to build the budget accordingly and tell the feds that we're going to do it that way. And then this body has to approve it. And then we can move on down the line with developing the actual RFPs or RFAs, depending on.
So is that up in California up to our judicial council to determine what courts, what counties get funding? How's that determined? What courts are funded?
We've asked the judicial council to develop that part of the process.
So just
Uh,
for
just-
clarity, if I may. One suggestion is a non-competitive process that partners, whatever law enforcement or probation or whomever, other stakeholders, other than the court, would be given a grant to do whatever process the court engages in. And the second option is to do a competitive grant, standalone funding that people would apply for and get, possibly for the reasons the 2 chief probation officers left the room and the sheriffs left the room, because they are charged with securing and storing and tracking, relinquished guns and one thing and another. So that's the 2 tracks I'm hearing.
Yeah, and so the question is it preferable to have, depending on what the courts do, and again, if the concern is the local law enforcement won't be funded to do whatever the courts decide they want to do, we set aside money specifically for the locals to do those activities that the courts may be asking of them through the court grant money. It's a separate pot of money. Or the alternative is it's just a competitive grant, and maybe a local jurisdiction or the court got money, the local jurisdiction wouldn't get any money because they're competing with other jujurisdictions.
Well, I might push back a little on option 1. You're holding this finger up for that one, which is the courts doing this. That's a very big unknown, that the courts might want to engage other stakeholders.
Yeah, we don't know right now.
Okay.
It's only $10 million.
That's,
And so I would like the need to be dictated to us or demonstrated to us by whoever applies and shows that they need it for whatever purposes or project they designs, rather than wait for the court to make a decision or for us to make assumptions about that.
I agree with that.
yeah, okay.
I think I realize just a few people have spoken, but I am getting the sense from the advisory board at this moment, maybe not full consensus, but that the needs are distinct enough between whatever may be funded through the judicial council for collaborative courts, and then all of these separate kinds of things and I do think the name is confusing. It's not a pass through in the way we often think of pass throughs. It's just this separate sub-award pot for local governments. That general sense from this group is, let's go ahead and not have a necessary linkage to the collaborative courts piece, but a broader opportunity for any counties or locals who may want to do some of these good activities to have a chance to get the funding. And that would be a separate competitive pot. That's what I'm hearing so far.
Or I can make it more complicated, because why not? It's the end of the day. We could do a hybrid, which is we could also give preference points to jurisdictions where the court got an award. So if they partner with the courts, then they could get slightly more advantageous scoring than a jurisdiction that again is a free-for-all. So
Yeah, but that would remain to be seen in the process, right? I mean, if you
we could, yeah,
That-
the threshold question is competitive, non-competitive, I think is what we're asking for
Yeah.
immediately, and then staff can bring back some additional ideas.
Okay, all right. Yes.
If someone applies through the competitive process and doesn't have a court to work with, are they precluded from getting and using the funds?
No, as long as they've used it for any of those funded activities.
Okay, thank you.
So
Sounds like it does. Do you need a motion and a vote? Because I missed that a few times today.
right.
Don't want to miss it the third time. Okay,
Okay, with that, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any further, so having narrowed it down to a competitive process, I wanted to see if there was any additional input on some of the questions. Obviously, we would develop and bring back recommendations, but regarding eligibility, size of awards, any focus on particular program activities, or just to leave those things open and we'll develop that.
really want to ensure.
So-
I'm good with staff development on
Okay, we'll just develop. All right. Thank you for that. Forgive me. I think I got out of whack on my PowerPoints there. All right, with that input at hand, I'd like to now turn towards a discussion of the proposed subawards to the Judicial Council. That's that second pot of money. I do need to confirm if we were able to get a member of the Judicial Council, either Francine Byrne or Martha Wright, on the Zoom. I was emailing with them back and forth at the last moment. Are either of them here? Before I tell you they're here?
Yes, we are both here. Hi, everyone. I'm Francine Byrne. I'm the Director of Criminal Justice Services at the Judicial Council.
Great.
welcome.
Got point.
All right, I was about to say that I asked Director Byrne to join us this time by Zoom in case there are any questions about the Judicial Council proposal that I'm not able to answer. To remind the board, the preliminary plan calls for 2 subawards to the Judicial Council, but we can essentially talk about them as one award, since the less than $10,000 allocation is proposed for the same purpose as the regular allocation, and it's only distinguished by the category of the jurisdiction to which those funds will go to. Now, the Judicial Council's proposal consists of 2 functions. One would be to fund an operational review to identify best practices for firearm relinquishment in criminal courts. And the second function would be collaborative courts to fund programs that address behavioral health needs for people in the criminal court system who are likely to use guns or be victims of gun violence. Subawards to the local courts from this funding would be administered by the Judicial Council. So I just wanted to open the floor to see if there are any questions or input regarding the subawards proposed for the Judicial Council.
I have none. Anybody? You're good, Ian.
All right, thank you very much for that. We will move forward on that basis. The last item that I wanted to touch base on was the performance measurement tool, or PMT, established by the BJA. Sorry, that's a lot of acronyms, by the Bureau of Justice Assistance for this grant. During our last meeting, the board requested information on data collection requirements that were established for the Byrne SCIP program. The PMT, which was included in your materials for today, requires quarterly reporting, broadly divided into the 5 categories you see here listed on the slide. The specific process for collecting and reporting the required data would be developed with our subrecipients in consultation with BJA as necessary. I just wanted to give the board an opportunity to ask any questions or provide any inputs regarding data collection now that you've seen the performance measurement tool required by BJA.
I have none.
Excuse me. Would there be an opportunity to revisit this issue once we see who's been awarded? Like, for example, if we see someone has a really creative program, we could see, oh, that's really great. What kind of data would they collect? Would there be an opportunity to return to this issue?
To return to which kind of data a specific subrecipient would be required to
Yes, to potential data fields that we might want to collect in addition to what's required by the federal PMT.
The normal process would be to require any data collection particulars in the RFP before we actually came back with a report on who had been awarded, because that would presumably wanted to build in some kind of requirement that would be in the RFP. So applicants knew, in addition to the PMT information, we want you to collect this other data. So that would be the normal process to identify that ahead of time. So applicants are fairly warned, so to speak.
All right. I think the board is satisfied.
We will move forward
All right.
as directed.
Thank you. And thank
No
you
problem.
for the long wait.
That was everything I needed.
right.
Now, do we have public comment on
I'm
this?
gonna.
Yeah, we should ask for public comment.
Heaven knows.
If I may, Linda, I just wanted to thank Ian and Ricardo for a great deal of good work on this project.
One last question, Ian or Ricardo. Is this going to be the custom of the at every BSCC meeting that this will be the follow-on meeting, or is were we just doing these time sensitively and then as needed in the future?
The plan as was originally developed was when a meeting is needed, it would be follow on the tail of a
Understood.
BSCC meeting. Obviously, in these first stages, we might have to come back more frequently because we're developing things for BJA approval and whatnot. Presumably, once the program stood up, we would need
Thank
less
you.
frequent meetings.
Thanks.
So I just want to say I mean, you're all here. It's kind of a challenge to not know when a meeting is going to be, because I don't know how long the board meeting is going to be. Today,
Yeah.
I didn't mind because I was interested and I was doing work
Yeah.
and watching but,
We
you know,
front loaded it last time, and I think we try to do that.
Okay.
This day was an exception.
yeah, and it was fine today.
Yeah, and we probably could start early, and I don't know how we'd manage it, but we commit to being aware of your time constraints and not taking up an entire day.
Yes, I would imagine we want to take that into serious consideration,
Yeah.
Jonathan. And I like the chair's suggestion. We do have our June board meeting date already set. We should be sure that you have that. Aaron's looking it up. And I do like the idea of having the Byrne SCIP be a special set for perhaps 9 a.m.
Yeah.
That would make your planning a whole lot better. Today was an extraordinary set of circumstances, the likes of which we rarely see. June 15th, which is a Thursday. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I think, is there any public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one on Zoom and one in person.
Okay,
I'll call the Zoom first. That would be, oh,
Yeah,
God.
Hamilton.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Ms.
That's okay.
Hamilton.
That's okay. Thank you. Hello, members of the Crisis Intervention Advisory Board. I really thank you for this opportunity to provide comment on this program. My name is Shika Hamilton, and I'm the Vice President of Organizing at Brady United Against Gun Violence, and I'm a longtime California resident. At Brady, we work to prevent gun violence through education, legislation, and advocacy, and we are particularly invested in the SCIP funding and ways in which we can ensure that these crisis intervention dollars are effectively utilized at all levels of state government to ensure that lives can be saved. And for some history, Brady helped lead the effort to pass California's gun violence restraining order, as we also led implementation efforts to educate frontline intermediaries such as law enforcement, healthcare workers, community leaders, and more about the tool's existence, process, and petitioner process through the Speak for Safety website. I'm here today to urge the advisory board to use some of the 2023 Byrne SCIP funding to invest in public education campaigns around California's GVRO and safe firearm storage, which is listed as an allowable activity. While GVROs and safe firearm storage are effective tools to reduce gun violence, research has shown that they are rarely used due to a lack of public awareness. For example, a comprehensive review by Governor Newsom's office found that in 2020, California's GVRO law was only used 1,284 times, a rate of only about 4 per 100,000 adult residents. That's roughly 8 times lower than the utilization rate in Governor DeSantis' state of Florida, which is 34 per 100,000 adult residents. Similarly, safe firearm storage rates in California remain dangerously low. In 2020, researchers at the University of California, Davis found that nearly 40% of gun owners in California stored at least one gun unlocked. One of the best ways to increase use of GVROs and safe firearm storage is through the development of a robust.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. You had a 2-minute time. Are you getting close to winding up?
I'm almost in, just a paragraph more. One of the ways is development of a robust multimedia public education campaign with distribution across the state. And we have one that's it's called End Family Fire, and 48% of gun owners say that when they see those ads, that they change how they store firearms. So as the advisory board develops plans for California's program, I urge you to invest in public education campaigns to increase GVRO and safe storage usage in our state. Thank you, and I apologize for going over.
No, thank you. And one member of the public I see coming forward.
Sorry.
You're gonna have to move that computer screen or we're just gonna hear a voice coming out
That's
of it.
fine. I'm so short. I'm not helping.
I
it.
never said that, for the record.
I'm Tanya Shart. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Senior Counsel and Director of State and Federal Policy at Brady. So that was my colleague you heard
Mhm.
just now. So I will try not to repeat everything that she said. So I have the distinct pleasure of working alongside advocates, survivors, partners, and elected officials to reduce gun violence through evidence-based policies here in California, which is my home state. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was a big step forward in the fight against gun violence at a federal level. And we're so pleased that the legislation allocated California a significant amount of funding to support gun violence reduction programs through this funding. While there's broad permissive use of the funding, we really want to make sure you all know that it's imperative that California take a public health approach to its investment. And GVROs and safe storage are effective tools to prevent gun violence before it happens. And yet, as Shika mentioned, research shows that both are underutilized because of a lack of public awareness. We think a public awareness campaign should be a priority here. This is how we prevent gun suicide, unintentional shootings involving children, and mass shootings. It wouldn't be a large investment, but it's really important that there is a specific investment in this type of public awareness. So we would urge you to include that in any kind of allocation of funding. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your remarks. Very informative. Okay, we've done a public comment and anything from the board going back.
I just want to say those 2 public comments were spot on. So from a local level,
Mhm.
GVROs are an extremely valuable tool that are extremely underutilized. And I think it's partly because of a lack of awareness and education.
Super helpful. All right. Ian, anything further from you?
No, ma'am.
I'm
I
going to
think I
take
have
the
everything I
liberty
need.
of adjourning this meeting. Woo, thank you all. Long day. You know, some people want to come back and do another meeting tomorrow, but I told them.